Hello, everyone. My name is Lex Weaver. I am the editor-in-chief for The Scope Boston, a digital news site that tells the stories of justice, hope, and resilience in the greater Boston area. We practice journalism as an act of service, working to connect communities and form civic life and amplify voices that are often overlooked or mischaracterized by traditional media. Today, we will be interviewing acting mayor and Boston mayoral candidate Kim Janey. Kim Janey has been on Boston City Council since 2017 as the District 7 councilor and the first woman to serve as a councilor for the district. Then in 2020, Janey became City Council president. And now, earlier this year, after former Mayor Marty Walsh was tapped to serve in the Biden administration, Janey became the first Black woman to become the Boston mayor. Mayor Janey, it is an honor to speak with you today and learn more about your campaign. I know that we do not have a lot of time with you today, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into our questions that have been compiled together from Scope staff as well as our readers. One of the main questions that we always like to ask our candidates, aside from what you have on your campaign website, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what really led you into the political sphere and then also to do the work that you do today?
Thank you so much, Lex. And let me just say what an honor and privilege it is to be with you and all of your readers and listeners and viewers. I am born and raised in the city of Boston. I love my city with all of my heart. It has given me so much as I sit before you as the first woman mayor of our city and the first Black mayor of Boston. And I bring to City Hall, I bring to this race a life experience that is like no other candidate in this race or any of my predecessors. And I am thrilled to serve and lead my city at this time, particularly given the number of unprecedented challenges we face. I grew up in Boston in the neighborhoods of Roxbury and the South End, the daughter of parents who came of age during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It's a large family of educators, artists, entrepreneurs, and activists. I saw a lot growing up, all the ways that my community was left out of opportunity. And I also saw the love, the resilience of my community, how folks organized, and all of that influenced me, inspired me, and informs my thinking now as I lead Boston through a lens of equity, hope, and justice and love. And I love that those are your themes here, justice, hope, and resilience. It is so important. It is why I've launched a campaign around joy for city residents, given how much we've been through almost after a year and a half of COVID-19 and the disproportionate impact that it's had on the Black community, on the Latino community, communities of color, needing for us to be really intentional about holding space for joy. And so that is a big part of what I am doing and how my policy is informed, through this equity lens. And so it's just a pleasure to be here. Just really briefly, went through Boston Public Schools, was bused as a child, 11 years old, during the battle to desegregate BPS. My parents were very active. My parents were educators, always fighting for me, took the lessons that they instilled in me, went on to high school through Metco after being bused in BPS. I had a daughter before I graduated. And was very determined to finish high school with my peers to graduate on time. And as a young single mom, I got my first apartment with a Section 8 voucher and became a community organizer because I saw all the ways that my daughter's life experience was very much connected to the life experience of other children. Then dedicated my entire career to child advocacy and fighting for better education opportunities for children, which led me to then run for the Boston City Council, becoming the first woman to represent District 7, and now the first woman mayor and the first Black mayor of Boston. And I just got to give a shout out because my father graduated from Northeastern. He was a young student, scholar, athlete, and activist. He and other students took over the president's office and demanded more Black studies, led to the creation of the African American Institute, which is now the John D. O'Brien Institute. And so I definitely want to be thinking of him and center him in this conversation as he passed last year.
Awesome. I want to jump into a little bit deeper with the questions. I'm wondering, what have you accomplished so far in your time as acting mayor, and how congruent are these accomplishments to what you're promoting on your campaign platform, and how would they reflect in your plans if elected?
Well, first, I would lead with the global pandemic. You know, everything is really tied to the health and wellness of our residents. And coming into office in the midst of a pandemic, that had to be the first priority. And so getting the vaccine out and making sure that we were doing it in an equitable way, because we already know that there was a disproportionate impact when it came to the Black and Latino community. And so I launched in my very first week of vaccine equity grant initiative, starting with $1.5 million that we gave out to a number of community groups who had trusted relationships on the ground, meeting people where they are. And I invested another $1.5 million into that grant initiative when I reopened the city, bringing that total to $3 million. Now, the focus was with our mass vaccination sites, our priority clinics, our community clinics, as well as our mobile vaccination clinics. Right now, our mobile vaccination clinics tend to be very key to our strategy of just meeting people where they are and getting the numbers up in terms of vaccines. I'm proud to say, under my leadership as mayor of Boston, we have more than 68% of all Boston residents having at least one dose of the vaccine. We've seen just in the last 2 weeks an increase of 8,000 shots going into arms. And I mention that because of two things. One, very important with the Delta variant. And we know that there's still some hesitancy out there, but we cannot play with this virus. It is very deadly, particularly for those who are unvaccinated and have complicated health issues. And we know for the Black community in particular, that there's a life expectancy gap of 30 years, depending on what zip code you live in. There are higher rates of diabetes, heart disease, asthma, et cetera. And so very important that we protect people with the life-saving vaccine. In addition, I've announced weeks ago, mask mandate as we bring our students back into school, a vaccine mandate for city employees. I have 18,000 employees that work for me. We took a very thoughtful worker-centered approach in that. And just yesterday, I announced a mask mandate for all spaces, indoor spaces that are open to the public. We have to do everything we can to slow the spread. And I would also mention the increases that we have seen in vaccinations of the Black community and the Latino community. I begin there because our health response is so tied to our economic recovery. It is tied to how we bring our children back to school. It is tied to how we get around our city. It is tied to everything that we do. And so it is important that we continue to lead. Under my leadership, Boston is one of the most vaccinated big cities in the country. That is the work that we've done on the ground. In addition, housing, we know, was a crisis long before COVID-19. In fact, COVID only served to expose and exacerbate so many inequities. And so we focused on housing. First week in office, $50 million in rental relief. We've also invested in home ownership. Everyone knows by now that there's a racial wealth gap of $250,000 in Boston. How we close that gap is through ownership, business ownership, and home ownership. I have invested so that first-time home buyers can get some assistance, moving that assistance from $10,000, which that's what it was in the past, to now $40,000. That is important. In terms of businesses, supporting our small businesses with $16 million going out to our small businesses, and also making sure that we continue to have the support, the technical assistance, particularly around outdoor dining. Before I got into office, we know that the city of Boston was spending $2.1 billion on goods and services and city contracts, tackling that issue as well, investing in small businesses, particularly those owned by women and people of color. Public transit. I don't own a car. I have been a big proponent and advocate of reliable transportation, particularly buses. We know that Black people spend 64 more hours in their commutes than white folks in Boston. And so I launched a fare-free bus, the number 28. It's a major economic corridor going down Blue Hill Avenue, connecting Mattapan Square, Grove Hall, and Nubian Square, 3 neighborhoods that have high poverty rates, Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury. So we are leading. When I say I am leading with an equity lens, and that informs everything I do, that is what is happening on the ground. Education was a big issue before I became an elected official, continue to lead on that front, whether it be a new policy for how students are admitted to our exam schools and making sure that there is access and inclusion there, or just getting our kids back into the classroom safely. So many issues, and a lot of our issues that are at a crisis point. That is why this moment is so critically important. And as a woman, and as the first Black mayor, I'm making sure that we all have a seat at the table, that we are all included. And so that is the work that I am focused on. I've always been focused on that work as an organizer, as an advocate, as someone who has always led with the racial justice lens. That is the work that I continued on the city council, and I certainly continue as mayor of Boston.
Awesome. One question that I have for you, and I've seen it pop up just several times online, and it's been a concern for some of our readers. There have been a lot of criticisms of you that you are hard to reach, or that you are disorganized in your approach. I'm just wondering, your thoughts on that, but how would you address these concerns if you continue in your position as an elected public official?
Well, I hope your viewers understand they cannot reach the mayor of Boston through social media. So I am the mayor, and if they want to contact me, they have to contact me through my office. And so I'm not on social media to connect with residents. Yeah. I am out in the neighborhoods every single day, meeting with residents all across our city. Mm-hmm. And then so if your viewers would like to be in touch, they should contact the mayor's office. They can call my office, and I'm going to give you the phone number right now, 617-635-3151. I'm also not on email. As the mayor of Boston, I am not on email. And so you want to contact my office, please do. Very accessible. I've had several folks come into City Hall. I am planning an open house. I've activated the plaza, even though it is on under construction. We have live concerts there every Friday, food trucks that are coming. We are using every opportunity. I have coffee hours that I've done, again, just to make sure that I'm being accessible in every single neighborhood. And we've activated these coffee hours in a way to bring joy, to bring hope to our communities, bringing in live artists, spoken word, musicians, a DJ. There's a Black woman who DJs every single coffee hour. And so I encourage folks to just contact my office, and they can contact the campaign. So if they want to catch me, they can catch me also at my campaign office, which is at 405 Center Street and Jamaica Plain. And certainly hope to catch folks at one of our coffee hours or one of our movie nights. We've also have been doing a lot of live concerts. Really important that we're activating our open space and giving residents all across Boston the opportunity to connect.
Yeah. If elected to a full term, how would you work in collaboration with the city council?
Well, I come from the city council, and so I certainly understand the importance of our legislative branch. I've had great relationships with a number of the councilors that I want to continue. We know that this election will bring a whole new slate of candidates And there are so many wonderful people that are running. I see them often out on the campaign trail at a number of events. And so it's been great to connect with them. We certainly need to make sure that we continue to collaborate and are working together in the best interest of Boston's residents. And so that's what we've done on a number of fronts, whether the FY22 budget, where we've got strategic investments in a number of areas, including how we police and reimagine policing. I know that is probably a big issue for folks who are watching today. And so I don't know if you're going to get your question there. I can save some of that for later. But there are so many investments there. We've done that work together. I was very proud to have my first budget pass overwhelmingly with a 10-2 vote. Unlike my predecessor, even before his first budget, after he was elected in office, had 6 months to work on a budget, and that was a 7-6 vote. You know, I ascended to the mayor's office, had only a few weeks, and got a 10-2 vote. And so I'm really proud of the work that I've been able to do in office as mayor and the work that I've been able to do with the Boston City Council. That will certainly continue under my tenure as mayor of Boston.
Awesome. I know you've answered this question a few times in the press before, but I wanted to ask it again. During the past year, members of the school committee were caught mocking people with Asian accents and disparaging white people from West Roxbury. That and other issues have led some people to call for a return of an elected school committee. What is your position on that?
Well, thank you so much. And to point out that that meeting happened last fall, long before I was mayor. It was important for me coming into office to make sure that we have a school committee that has the trust of the people that they serve. And so when I had the opportunity to appoint 2 new members, I made sure to, one, make sure that there was representation. There was a void in Latina leadership with members resigning, and I wanted to make sure that we were meeting and addressing that void. I appointed 2 stellar candidates who have strong roots in education, a lot of expertise in that field. Both of them are parents of Boston Public School students, which is very important. One of them grew up undocumented here in the city. That certainly informs her thinking. The other is the first school committee member whose primary language is not English. And it is important that we support her success. She's a parent organizer. And as we do that, we are pushing ourselves to do better, to serve all of our families and students whose first language is not English. And so I'm really proud of those appointments. I have been on record for a number of years now saying that I am certainly open and interested in exploring a hybrid model of the Boston School Committee. I do feel that parents and other key stakeholders need to feel that there is a direct line of accountability to them. With some elected seats, if that's the way we end up going. And I've always said, long before I became mayor in March, that there needs to be direct accountability to the mayor, especially given, our budget. This is an overall city budget of $3.75 billion with over $1 billion going to our schools. And so I believe when you appoint good people, and have good people serve, then families do feel respected and feel represented. And so I was really proud of the appointments that I made earlier this year.
That's awesome. That kind of gets into one question that I had, just because Boston is such a diverse city. We do have many folks here who aren't native English speakers or are undocumented, and also just go through a lot of hardships as well, along with the Black and Latino communities. And I know a big portion of your platform does focus a lot on Black and Latino and Brown communities just in general. I'm just wondering, when elected as mayor, how do you, what are your plans to access some of these other communities that aren't necessarily as highlighted as much on your platform, and helping them build equity as well?
Well, I am mayor of all of Boston, and I've been to every single neighborhood. I connect with residents of all backgrounds all across our city. What we know in Boston, as it is a majority people of color city,
Yes.
that many people, even with those numbers, many people are still left out of opportunity, don't have access. Are not at the table where decisions are being made, feel as if they don't have power. Yeah. And so for me, it is important that we are bringing everybody in, that we are making sure that we take advantage of this opportunity to create a more equitable Boston for all of us, a stronger Boston, a city that is more just and more resilient. And we do that by working together across racial lines, across language, linguistic, cultural, ethnicity, nationality, immigrant status, gender, how people identify, who they love. Everyone is welcome, and we are stronger because of our diversity. And so I have been intentional with a focus on equity and lifting up those who have been left behind. It is important that we create a Boston where there's shared prosperity, where there's shared opportunity. Boston, I led with how much I love my city. Boston is a great city, a world-class city, but it has not always worked for everyone. Yeah. For me as mayor, it is important that we make sure that Boston is working for everyone, that everyone who wants to call Boston home can do so, that everyone has opportunity for good jobs, to start a business, to buy a home, to be able to live in an apartment without worrying about being displaced, to be able to go to parks, to raise children, to have good careers, to not have to worry about gun violence, making sure that we're addressing trauma in our neighborhoods, that people have access to good quality health care, that we're closing and dealing with these inequities that have been with us for years, decades, and centuries. It is important that we are intentional about that work and that we're doing that work together. And that has been my focus as mayor.
Great. I know I don't have you for too much longer, so I just want to start to wrap up. But one thing that I definitely wanted to ask, because I think it's hard for anybody anywhere to ignore what's going on in Afghanistan. I'm just curious to know what Boston's plans are, and if they plan to implement any policy or take in any Afghan refugees.
Well, we are certainly, I have joined with other mayors across the country for temporary protected status, not just for Afghanistan, but also for Haiti. We know that there has been devastation with another earthquake there. And certainly this is right on the heels of the assassination of the president. And so I've joined with other mayors to ask for and demand protected status for any folks who may find themselves certainly here in our city, but on American shores, but certainly here in our city.
Awesome. And since I know that we're short on time, I just wanted to open up the floor to you, because I know a lot of times when you do interviews with media outlets, it's just direct questions. So I want you to just have the opportunity to express anything that you would like the general public to know, either about you or your campaign, that you haven't been asked before by the media.
Well, I want to make sure I take just an opportunity to thank you. You've had some excellent questions, and I know there are other folks who have been submitting questions, and so I thank you for the thoughtfulness. I thank you for the interest in how a city government works and what it means to run for office, and I encourage everyone listening to certainly take a look at my website, mayorjaney.com, to visit our campaign office at 405 Center Street in Jamaica Plain, to be more active. I've always been a champion of our young people, not just K through 12, but our younger adults in their own activism. It has been young people who have always led, who have always been at the forefront of every movement. We're talking about the civil rights movement. We're talking about, women's rights, whatever the issue, young people have always led the way. And so I'm really grateful to each and every one who may be listening, and certainly encourage your continued engagement. I've been very clear that this is our moment to make sure we're doing everything, not just to lift up those who have been left behind, to make sure we are creating a strong Boston, a stronger Boston than ever before. I, as mayor, I'm not trying to bring us back to normal when I know that normal is a racial wealth gap of $250,000 and mass incarceration and a housing crisis and schools that don't always work for all students. I want us to go better. We cannot go back. We need to go better. We have no other choice. And we have to do that work together, bringing residents from all across our city together in a way to create a stronger Boston, and a Boston that's more equitable, just, and resilient. And it's not just about election cycles. Yes, September 14th is very important, and I hope to earn the votes of people who are watching here, and that they support their first woman mayor, and that we do this work together. But it's after the election. It's after September 14th, after November 2nd, that we have to continue to do this work. These inequities are years, decades, and centuries in the making. And to address them will take all of us working together. And so I certainly hope to earn your support, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.